How does Novak Djokovic get to compete at the Australian Open? On Tuesday, the Independent Medical Exemption Review Panel, appointed by the Victorian Department of Health, provided Novak Djokovic a medical exemption, sparking outrage in Australia, alleging favoritism. Novak Djokovic has 20 Grand Slam titles, 9 Australian Opens. He's been on the circuit since 2003. List a senior reporter on a Sunrise 7 News morning segment on Wednesday about one of world sports most documented players, and no one knew he had a serious medical issue through all this. The sarcastic tone mimics the sentiment shared by Melbourne of locals who have gone through 262 days of lockdown, the most for any major city in the world, to combat the pandemic. According to the Victoria government had announced, the tennis Australian reiterated a few months ago that every individual that enters Melbourne Park of the Australian Open will need to be fully vaccinated. This would mean world number one Djokovic, who had refused to reveal his vaccination status, would not be allowed to defend this title, that is, unless he had a medical exemption because of a condition that stopped him from being inoculated. On Tuesday, the Independent Medical Exemption Review Panel, appointed by the Victorian Department of Health, provided him that exemption, sparking outrage in Australia, alleging favoritism. Outrage. Apparently, it's an independent panel, said Australian player James Duckworth while suppressing a smile and shrugging. He must have fit the criteria somehow. If he fits the criteria, he should be able to come. The criteria for exemption, as declared by Australian Technical Advisory Group on Immunisation, list inflammatory cardiac illness within the past 3 months, acute major medical conditions, a positive COVID-19 infection in the past 6 months, which can result in vaccination being deferred, and adverse events following immunization. This can only work if a previous dose has been taken. With such conditions listed, it's unlikely that a professional tennis player suffering from any of these could compete at the level Djokovic did over the past few months. What may irk crowds further is Djokovic's track record in dealing with the pandemic. He had infamously organized the Adria Tour event in Balkans with no restrictions or protocols in place. With the pandemic raised in June 2020, it resulted in several players, including himself, testing positive, and he's been adamant in his refusal to be inoculated or even reveal if he's taken a shot. There is also no telling on what criteria Djokovic received the exemption, something only the player can reveal. News of the Serb getting an exemption and travelling to Australia came just a day before the ongoing Big Bash League had to cancel its game between Brisbane Heat and Sydney Sixers because 12 players from the Heat franchise tested positive. Process. Tournament director Craig Taylor claimed that 26 players had applied for exemption, but only a handful were granted it. The applications were reviewed by two separate panels of doctors and experts, including the Independent Medical Exemption Review Panel, set up by the same government that previously said it will strict in ensuring arriving players are all vaccinated. Curiously, there are no cross-checking as to authenticity of the documents provided. In some instances, they requested additional information, but no, they wouldn't have contact with doctors from another country. Tennis Australia's Chief Medical Officer Caroline Broderick told The Age the review panels were looking for official seals on these documents from overseas. It wasn't just based on text messages. Some of the documents they are receiving from overseas, they were actually formal laboratory reports. As far as any medical profession would look at the documents, they are not doing any sort of intelligence operation. Possible loophole. In general, the criteria and process are clear, including the travellers who are allowed to apply for exemptions as listed on the Australian Government's Department of Home Affairs website. Essentially, the list includes those travellers that wish to arrive in Australia with the purpose of assisting in COVID-19 response. Individuals who can provide a medical and critical services are also eligible for exemption, as are students. There is no mention of sports person or athlete whatsoever. There is, however, an arbitrary criterion: a foreign national whose entry into Australia would be in the national interest supported by the Australian government or a state or territory government authority. This does not list who would be of national interest, and so that decision is left with the government agencies whether the world number one, the defending champion at Australia's grandest tennis event and arguably one of the three major crowd pullers in men's tennis, fits that billing. In terms of what ailment Djokovic may have had that render him unable to take the vaccine, there is possibility that he may have been infected with the virus for the second time during the last 6 months. This would force him to defer his inoculation dates by 6 months. favoritism. Former world number one Jamie Murray, the elder brother of three-time single major winner Andy, was quick with his assessment of Djokovic's exemption. I think if it was me that wasn't vaccinated, I wouldn't be getting an exemption, he said. The ATP Cup captain for Great Britain, Liam Bronte, claimed, "You just have to trust that he had a valid reason for the medical exemption. That's all you can say, really." Two-time Australian Open quarterfinalist Dennis Strangren, who has also not been vaccinated, has been applied for exemption since who did not fit the requirements stated on the government website. When a news post on social media announced Djokovic will be traveling to the Slam, Sandgren was asked by fellow American Tommy Paul if he too will be competing. Not quite the same pulse came Sandgren's answer. Another American player, Mitchell Kruger, retweeted the exemption for Djokovic by saying, "In other news, water is wet and sky is blue," hinting that it was a rather obvious outcome. But there will be few players feeling hard done by. Russian player Natalia Viktoria, former world number 54, currently ranked 195, could not travel for the qualifiers because she has been fully vaccinated with Sputnik vaccine, which is not recognized in Australia. Similarly, Indian youngster Amia Dahiya, who was hoping to play in the boys event, has received just one shot since vaccines were only recently made available to the U18s in India. His request too has been denied. Meanwhile, an unvaccinated Djokovic has been granted entry. Thank you.